This is episode 24 of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. My name is Todd Dawalt, and my job here is to help you grow your leadership skills, grow your business, and grow your income. We have an interesting interview on tap for you today. This is with Nick Baucom. He is a former Marine, spent some time in Iraq serving our country there, came back, started a construction company in Tennessee. It didn't go well. He ended up filing bankruptcy, closing the business down, but then a few years later, he started a very successful business in Washington, D.C. He's going to be sharing with us some really interesting leadership advice that he has learned from his experience in the military as well as from going through bankruptcy. So, Nick Baucom, let's get the interview started. Here we go. All right, well, Nick, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Great. So before we get started, just tell us a little bit, what's the name of your business, where you located, and what do you do?
My company's name is Two Marines Moving. Don't let the name fool you, though. We actually hire from all branches, and I've got about 100 employees that work for me. We're in Washington, D.C. We do residential, commercial moving, storage, local, long distance, pretty much any kind of labor that's needed for the actual move. And then the people that do the move, again, are all veterans.
Gotcha. So the listeners are probably wondering, all right, this is a construction podcast. Nick seems like a great guy already. He's got a successful moving company. Why do we need to listen to Nick? So here's the answer to that question. Nick started out with a construction company years ago and learned a lot from that. So let's talk about that. If you would, tell us about your construction business you started and the type of work you did.
Yeah, sure. I started my construction business shortly after I got back from Iraq. So I think I got back in 2003. And then I watched a lot of my counterparts and comrades from the Marines. They went and spent their money that they got while they're overseas. It's almost a forced savings account because you've got nowhere to spend it when you're over there. And so they bought, clothes and big trucks and electronics and stuff. And, I always someone that, valued financial independence and knew that owning a home was one path towards that. So I bought a house in Germantown, Tennessee, and I was just turning 21. And a few short weeks after I bought the house, the Tennessee Department of Transportation offered me, or said that they wanted to take the front little small portion of my property to include a turn lane on the road that my house set in front of. So I thought they were going to give me $3,000 or $4,000. Again, it was a tiny little bit they took. And ended up being, they wrote me a check for $52,000.
Wow.
And yeah, so I'm 21 years old, just bought a home, and now I've got $52,000. And I've always been a voracious reader on business, on leadership, on entrepreneurship. I've read a lot of books by Donald Trump and about buying and flipping properties. And of course, that was also, we're in 2004, 5, 6 we're talking about here. It was also quite all the rage, whether HGTV, like that was the thing to do, buy and flip a home, make quick money, and make good money. So I went house shopping and ended up buying another house, and I told some friends about this, and I was gonna go in and put in new electrical and plumbing and carpet and all that stuff, and they said, hey, I've got a project, can you build me a deck? And I'd started to meet with carpenters and plumbers and electricians and started to build a network, and I just saw an opportunity to have a business where if someone needed a deck, a roof, a fence, whatever it was, like I was starting to get to know the people that could do it. I can sell and sell the job and then leave it to the experts on what to do. So I was doing both work for other people and I bought an additional home. So I bought 2 homes to flip and was doing work for customers of Baucom Built Construction as well.
Gotcha. So fast forward a little bit, things didn't go so well, and you had to close the business, shut things down. Talk a little bit about what went wrong with the business.
Oh man, I could write a book on that. Things not to do. Nick Baucom. I'd say there were a few. One, one primary that comes to mind was I over leveraged myself. So I'd read books on Donald Trump and how he bought a property for $100 million and flipped it for $150 million. Now I certainly wasn't on that level, but in my own world, I was buying a home on entirely just my credit, and everything had to go perfectly for it to work out, and it didn't. Because leverage works both ways. So you can use the bank's money to make a lot of money, but if it goes sour or if it goes south, you can lose way more than you put in, because you put 5% down, but you're borrowing 95%. And so I was in over my head, and I was over leveraged on those properties that I purchased to flip.
So you ended up had some bank financing that didn't go well. You had to close the business down. Talk a little bit about what would you say are some of the not so, what are the things that people deal with that close down a business that other people don't realize? What are some of the not so apparent side effects of having to close a business? Because I had to do the same thing, and frankly, I wouldn't want anybody to go through it, no matter how much I disliked them. It was the single most painful and stressful time of my life. But talk a little bit about what your experience was and how bad it was, I guess.
Oh man, Todd, I could not agree with you more on the most painful experience in my life. I've lived 31 years now and seen ups and seen downs, and then I was in the Marines, I was infantry. I deployed to Iraq, and I'd rather go back to Iraq for a year or indefinitely rather than lose another business. It was gut wrenching. It was a blow to my ego, a blow to my self-worth, certainly the financial pressure. Bills are due, and big bills are due. It's not $300 for utilities. It's this cost on the house, suddenly the foundation's not solid, and that's a surprise $20,000 mistake that needs to be fixed. So it wasn't just pull out your piggy or go turn your coins in. Like the money gets so big, especially when I was over leveraged as I was. But yeah, I remember being in my living room and thinking like, well, I know myself. I'm a Marine. I'm tough. I'm Nick Baucom. I'm not giving up. But I swear to God, if I walked out and crossed the street right now I had a Wendy's across the street from me. If I got hit by a bus, I wouldn't mind. Like that was awful. Having to face friends and peers, and to my view, of course, they all loved me and just the same. But in my world, like now I've got to be seen as a failure instead of a success. That was absolutely awful.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I remember thinking when people quit or I had to fire people or lay people off at the end, I remember being a little bit jealous, thinking, I wish I could get fired from this.
Yeah.
I wish this was just a job.
Yeah, because you just move on and get another job. You're not. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and then I can definitely empathize. You associate your identity and maybe even your value with your business, and you're like, hey, I built this business. I'm especially in the construction industry.
Yep.
And then when it goes south, you're like, not only is my business a failure, but then at least I took the leap like I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And I just failed. I failed my family. I let my parents down.
Yeah.
I wasted years of my life, and man, it's harsh. And I was not prepared. I started my business when I was about 27, I think,
Mm-hmm.
28.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was ready. And I'd worked for a general contractor for 5 years, built hospitals and relatively complicated projects,
Mm-hmm.
and had the thought, why am I working for this other company and making them all the money when I could make the money? And
Yep.
my experience was I found out pretty quickly that I wasn't ready from a business standpoint. Yeah, I could put buildings together, but there was all this other stuff that I was not prepared for. Did you have a similar experience about the business side of it?
Yeah, I had incredible drive and ambition, same as I do now. But it was, what is it? My grandfather used to say, like, what was it? bricks are too big for your pockets, something like that. And it was my business acumen had not caught up, and so there's a ton of stuff. Even now with Two Marines moving, like in the last month, I've had to deal with regulations with Department of Transportation, Department of Labor, Virginia DMV, OSHA, and then you add into that marketing, advertising, accounting. If you're an employee at a company, even a small business, you typically have a very defined role, and sometimes you might go outside of it. But you better be prepared if you're going to have your own business to do 20 roles and do them well. And then when you grow and stuff, you can hire that out. You're a CPA or an operations manager or a sales manager. But at first, you really got to be good at all of them. At least good, if not great.
Yeah. And what I've found is it's so hard for people to make the jump from being the one man or one woman show to grow their business to the point where they can afford to hire other people, because that jump where you're doing the job of 3 or 4 people simultaneously, to make that jump successfully, man, that's hard. And I remember looking at some of the subcontractors I worked with, and they were just, they were happy to go out to the job site every day. They had 1 or 2 helpers. Thinking, man, like Larry was a plumber. Larry, why don't you grow your business?
Yeah.
I don't. I thought, man, Larry's really missing out.
Yeah.
But actually, Larry was pretty smart.
Yeah.
He was just like, I'm okay where I'm at. I don't want any more.
Yeah.
And one thing I learned is you need to listen to the old timers, the guys who've been around the block a little bit. I figured out, unfortunately, I didn't know nearly as much as I thought. I passed up on a lot of good advice.
Yeah, no, and the importance of listening to others, is absolutely key. I've got a great mentor in Oscar Weigel, and he's a mentor. He's like a second, father. He owns a business, and his business probably does, 20 million revenue a year, maybe more. He's got 8 locations, so maybe even more. But he has been instrumental in my success. When I've faced difficulties, he said, you know what, I've been exactly there before. Here's what you need to do. And I learned, probably because my ego had been bruised on that construction business, with Two Marines moving, I learned it's okay to have that ego and drive and ambition, but know when to set it to the side and listen to other people.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. That is a really tough one. Because I found this article recently that often successful businesses, especially contractors, go out of business because of some of the things that made them successful.
Yep.
You started a business, you got some drive, and you hustle, and then you get some measure of success, and then you think, I'm invincible. I can do anything.
Yep.
I'm going to go, I was a successful earthwork contractor and grew the business, so now I'm going to be a real estate developer.
Yep.
Or I'm going to go into concrete or something completely different, or medical office buildings. And it's what do you think is the key? How do you balance? How do you keep that drive that makes you successful? How do you keep that from causing you to crash and burn? You know what I mean?
No, that's a very good question, and I do want to go back to what you said. That was also part of my failure with the construction business. I was very good at a couple things. I was great at the sales and the front end office stuff, and then I could piece together, all right, I can find someone that can do this job. But there was nothing that I wouldn't turn down. If I was doing a deck for someone and the customer asked me, hey, can you take down this tree? Well, absolutely. I know the prices to take down a tree. They're a lot of money. Like, that'll be $2,000. And I'm thinking, man, I watch guys take down a tree in a day for $2,000. All right, well, I can charge, $2,000. I can find someone else that'll do it for $1,000, and I'll pocket $1,000. All right, you want a deck? Oh, you want your house painted? And so I spread myself way too thin, without a doubt. And now with my company, with Two Marines Moving, what we focus on is moving. We pick things up and we set them down.
That's a great way to put it.
We profitably please our clients. We leave them with, with a positive taste in their mouth and with wishing that that they could spend more time with us. And we keep it that simple. And so rather than trying to be everything to everyone, and I could very quickly with a moving company say, hey, we'll clean up your house as well for $200. You want your deposit back, and I could find some people to be a maid service. But you know what? That's getting out of my area of core competency. Last year, I turned down about $3 million in business. We're booked pretty much year round. We've got more demand than we have supply, and the reason that we do is because we just focus on moving. Like we keep it simple, and we focus on it like a laser, and we turn up that heat and turn up that beam, and we don't ever lose sight of our target.
How do you maintain that focus when there's so many opportunities? And I would guess you probably have people coming to you and saying, Nick, man, I've got this great opportunity. You could just crush it. And what are some practical things you do? Like, do you run these ideas past a mentor? Do you sit on them for 2 weeks? Do you have like some practical advice for people who on how to maintain that focus and discipline?
It's really simple. Just say no. I love the power of no. Like, it's because you can you've only got so much mental energy to begin with. If you've got a wife or kids, or if you're not married, say you have parents, like you've got a family, a social life, you've got your business interest, your current clients. We already have to make plenty of decisions every day, and as human beings, we can all only make so many. And so I say no a lot more, 100 to 1. I say no to things more than I say yes, and it frees up my mind to focus clearly on what that end goal is with Two Marines moving.
And that's some good advice. That is some really good advice. All right, so you mentioned you were a Marine, you were in Iraq. Tell us about what you learned in the military that applies to leadership and business.
Oh, wow. Again, that's another book, Todd. A ton. That's actually, the title of my book, On the Move, A Marine's Guide to Entrepreneurial Success. It pretty much lays out a lot of the similarities between military leadership being deployed and how that applies to having a business. One example is the fog of war. So in our classroom settings in the Marines infantry, we're taught about the fog of war, and then how to be comfortable in the knowledge that you don't really know what's around that next corner. It's the fog of war. You've got lots going on. There's bullets flying through the air, explosions. You've got a radio where you're mic'd up to your ear, communicating with your team, possibly with air support or calling in medevacs. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it gets a little hazy because there's so much to do, and you've got clarity, like focus on that first task that's in front of you. But what's in that next house that you're going to go into? You don't know, but you still got to be decisive, kick in that door, and take that house. And it's the same within business. You can write a business plan and make all the rosy projections that you want, and you can sit there idly and figure out what kind of logo you want, or what should you be, a C Corp or an S Corp or all this other fluff and stuff, but you still don't know how it's all going to play out. Like, you can spend $5,000 on a marketing campaign, you don't actually know, but you still have to be decisive and kick in that door and take that house. That definitely applies, and being comfortable operating when you don't know all of the details. You still make an educated guess, but you got to be decisive in taking action when you don't have every last fact. All
right, let me pause right there. I read something, Colin Powell had a decision-making process. He called it his 40-70 rule.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never make a decision with less than 40% of the information you think you need, and never wait to get more than 70% of the information you need, because you'll never get 100% of the information.
Yep, I love that, and it kind of dovetails with one of the things that I tell my staff. And I might, based on that, Colin Powell knows what he's talking about. I might have to adjust it, but 80% solution now is better than 100% solution later. Like,
right on.
Take action now, do it.
Absolutely. You had written an article, and I can't remember the title of it, but it was something to the effect of going forward in battle as opposed to turning from the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do a better job of explaining that than I did, because I thought that was really powerful, and I can't put my finger on the article right now.
Yeah, sure. I think it was an article that I wrote for Inc. magazine, and it alluded to, sometimes the best option is to do what at first seems counterintuitive. As an example, so if you're in Iraq or Afghanistan, and we're Marines on patrol, and suddenly we take fire, from a nearby, house that's off across a wash. It would be a very immediate and easy decision for most people to think, oh crap, let me let me sit down, let me lie down, let me hug the dirt as close as possible, take cover, and just completely hide from the action, because you've got rounds coming down range towards you. It's kind of scary. But it's actually the absolute wrong thing to do. For your Marines to survive, we're immediately taught, and this goes into our immediate action drills. We rehearse them hundreds, if not thousands of times. You take fire from the enemy from the right-hand side. Every Marine knows that fire is coming from there. You yell contact right. Everybody faces towards that direction, and then immediately starts leaping and bounding towards the enemy. And so you pick out one of your Marine buddies. He starts shooting at the target while you advance. And then you switch. You shoot at the target while he advances up and rushes forward. And you keep doing that up and down. And through maneuver and fire, you angle in on the enemy. And first of all, they're completely stunned that there's Marines basically charging across an open field. They're going to be thrown off of what their expectations were on what would happen. And secondly, you now take the offensive because you want other people to react to you. And so it seems counterintuitive when you're getting shot at to charge towards the enemy, but that's your best way of survival. If you just sit there, you do the opposite. You let them take advantage. You let them take the offensive. Now you're reacting to them. So the first thing we do is we lay down a large amount of suppressive fire and we charge towards the enemy. So same thing in business, where sometimes it could seem like, the best thing to do, especially, if, I know going through that bankruptcy as I did, like, man, you don't want to answer that phone call. You don't want to have to tell the person that, well, I can't pay this bill. But what you got to do, what I, have learned over time is you got to make those tough decisions. And you've got to do some things that are tough and not pleasant. But in the end result is going to get you where you want to go. And so sometimes, it's about just recognizing that this isn't going to be pleasant, but overall, I've got to do this or get through this to get to where I want to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, that is such good advice. And my advice to people in those kind of situations is the same. Obviously, in a business situation, or let's say you have a personnel issue, you've got somebody you've got to have a hard conversation with. Human nature, for some reason, is just to avoid discomfort. Yep. We have this overriding, overwhelming hatred for discomfort. Mm-hmm. And I would say you learned how to defeat that fear of discomfort in the Marines. Unfortunately, most of us who didn't go through the military don't have that experience. But what I found is, like, when you turn and, like, if the problem is to your right and you turn to your left to run away from it, whether it's that bill that you can't pay, or the personnel issue that you don't want to face, or the angry customer, that thing gets bigger when you turn and go away from it. But what I found is when you go right at it, that thing gets smaller. Yep. And you're in the driver's seat. You're operating from a position of power and resourcefulness, and then you can tackle that thing. And I've made that mistake. When I had my own business, I let so many things pile up that I didn't deal with that it was just overwhelming. Yeah. And it's paralyzing when you've got 14 or 27 different things that you can't fix. And you're just like, screw it. I'm not going to touch any of it. And it's the completely wrong approach. It's the natural approach is to not address things, but man, I'm convinced that the most successful business people and leaders they'll just go straight at things. As uncomfortable as they may be, they just go straight at it, get right in the middle of it, and just solve it.
Yeah, no, I'm at a place now where I love discomfort. because discomfort means stuff is getting done, whether it be, with an employee issue, a customer issue, a tough talk you've got to have, even on a personal relationship, whatever it is. If there's discomfort, that means something's being done. Because you're taking that elephant in the room and you're shooting them. Let's just call it out. Here's what it is. Now, how do we solve it? And it is going to be uncomfortable. And I think recognizing that's just a normal, natural process. Hey, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Okay, so what? All right, now we're through the discomfort, problem solved. I'm now where I want to be.
Yeah, and what I found is, like, if there's 8 or 10 people in a room, everybody's thinking it. They're like, man, I wish somebody would address the elephant in the room. And then if somebody just steps up and says, hey, here's the elephant, let's shoot this thing in the head.
Yep.
And move on, then everybody's like, oh, thank you.
Yep.
I'm so glad you did that.
Yep.
It was just I couldn't do it. So yeah, that's especially in a corporate environment, it's really bad. That is some great advice. Discomfort means something is being done. I like that. So tell us about your current business and what were some of the different paradigms or the different, how did you approach your new business based on what you learned? How did you approach your new business differently based on what you learned from your construction business?
Probably a few quick points come to mind. One, I was not over leveraged with this business. First of all, I didn't have a choice. I'd just been through a business bankruptcy, so there were no loans available for me.
Right.
And people will often say, well, I can't start my own business or expand it because I'm undercapitalized. And that's an absolute lie. It's a lie that people tell themselves and tell other people. There's always, where there's a will, there's a way, and where there's a problem, there's a solution. And so I started this business, and you'd think, well, you need to have capital to start, a moving company. You have to have trucks and office space. And I didn't have any of that starting off. A lot of people have their garage is the famous place where entrepreneurs often start their business, and I lived in an apartment, so I didn't have a garage. So I met my staff for the first several months that we were in business. I met the people that I hired in the Penske parking lot. And when we got a job for a move, we would go rent a Penske truck, and I would tell my crews, hey, meet me at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'd typically go out on one of the trucks, and the other crew would go out. And yeah, it was about 4 or 5 months after I started the business that I actually got office space from my mentor, actually, that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, it was bootstrapped, to say the least. I started in Two Marines Moving with my last $2,000, and last year we did $4 million in revenue. This year we'll do about $5 million in revenue, and yeah, all that from a couple $1,000 and a lot of sweat and a lot of blood, literally.
Yeah, that's amazing. In today's environment, there's this intrigue with like venture capital or raising money, coming up with this great idea, and then spending the first year pitching, trying to raise investor capital before they do the first thing. And personally, I think that's a recipe for disaster. That is not a sustainable business start. We're going to take a quick break from the interview and hit on something that a lot of contractors I talk to are really concerned about. It's also something that I have personally spent a lot of time thinking about, and that's the subject of cash flow. How am I going to make payroll? How am I going to pay my vendors? Why do I have to check the bank account at 6 o'clock every morning to see what's going to hit my checking account? If you own or manage a small construction operation and you struggle with cash flow, you are not alone. You work on a project for a month or more, you pay the cost of labor, fuel, materials, phone bills, insurance, overhead, and then you don't get paid for 30 to 60 days. Besides stress, cash flow crunch mode causes a lot of other problems, and that's what I call it, cash flow crunch mode. You get really short-sighted in cash crunch flow mode, and you start to make decisions just for the short term. What do you have to do to make payroll? You also start playing to not lose instead of playing to win, and it's almost impossible to grow a business under these conditions. To help you out, I will be hosting a live online training or a webinar on how to get out of cash crunch mode and upgrade your profit margins, where I'll share at least 5 of the strategies that I used personally to get the company that I ran out of cash flow crunch mode, make it more profitable, and also grow it from about $4 million in annual revenue to $10 million in annual revenue in about 3 years. Now, I am not a finance guy, so I'm not going to be talking about complicated strategies, bank loans, factoring receivables, any sort of financial strategy that doesn't make sense to you. But I will be sharing some ideas that worked for me that I'm confident you can put into action immediately. If you'd like to register for this free webinar, go to constructionleadingedge.com/cashflow to get registered. There's also a link on the homepage and also on the show notes for this interview. Now let's get back to the interview. Let me ask you this. Let's say there's some folks listening. They're a project manager for a construction company, or an engineer or a superintendent, and they've got this entrepreneurial itch, and they're like, I want to do something on my own. I want to start my own business. I don't know what. I like construction. What kind of advice would you give them? What are the first few things that you would tell them to do, or things to think about, other than what you just gave, which is some great advice, which is start with what you've got. You don't need office space and a bunch of money to get started. But what would be, if you were going to start a business in construction, with no money and really not much of an idea, what would you do? Where would you start?
Well, 2 things that come quickly to mind that apply for a construction business or any business. One reason that I've been successful with Two Marines Moving is without a doubt my number one thing is, the number one thing is I leave it unsaid, because I think you gotta have it no matter what, and that's integrity. But quickly behind that would be perseverance. I lost my construction business, and it failed, but I wasn't a failure. The reason I wasn't a failure is because I never gave up. And you need to know for sure, which direction you're walking in. Make sure you know where you're going. But if you're going in the right direction, it's the same way as you get through a 20-mile hike in the Marines with 100 pounds of gear. You get to the end by putting one foot in front of the other. And it's miserable, and it's 5 hours or 4 or 5 hours on your feet and all that gear. But I tell you, you feel like the king of the world when you're done with that 20-mile hike, and you got your full battle rattle on, you're with all your Marines, and that comes back to perseverance. And it's what led me from, having a business failure to having a business success, was never giving up. And I think secondly, the second thing that comes to mind with that, hire people that you can trust. That's one problem that I had when I had a construction business is, everybody said they could do everything, and I was just going off the fact of, I suppose, naive. If I say something, I mean it. Apparently, that's not the case with everyone. And I can do painting, I can do tile, and I'd end up messing up the customer's tile job. Not me personally with my hands, but me as taking responsibility as the owner of the company, and that just cost me $2,000. Well, my profit was $1,000, so I just woke up this morning and ate $1,000 because Jimmy or John or whoever, said they could do this and they couldn't. And I got into several instances like that. And that's one reason that led me to hire not just the staff that I do. I mean, I hire from veterans, and they're a great group. I've got the best job in the world. They're a great group, but we don't hire everyone just because they're a veteran. Like, we look at their resume, their background. We want to make sure they're a good fit here, and we only hire about half the people that apply. Because I've got to send people in someone's home, someone's house, with all their belongings, their valuables, everything that's most important to them. And we're going to box it all up and take it somewhere. And I can't have a question, any question about who I would send in that house. And so, we keep very stringent hiring standards. And on one hand, I hate turning away that $3 million in business, but I'd rather keep the integrity and keep the profit I have going with Two Marines Moving than to let my standards down and take a short-term profit for a long-term loss.
Yeah, I would completely agree. Perseverance is the key, and then having a long-term view, not taking the quick money at the expense of sacrificing your company's integrity or or even the success of your company. That's some great advice. Tell me this: what are some common mistakes that you see small business owners making?
Two came to mind right when you asked that. One is they get caught up in details that don't matter.
So
And
give me some more details on that. What are some of those?
Well, it goes back to what you said earlier. It's kind of human nature to avoid discomfort, and I guess I said earlier, like, oh, should I be an S corp or a C corp, or should I change my logo, or is this website good enough? Do I need a new website? All that stuff's important, but you're going to get to all that stuff if you do what's most important: profitably please your client. Leave them with a smile on their face and with a check in your wallet. And go out there. If I were to lose 2 Marines moving today, the first thing I'd do is I know how to mow yards. I like working outside. Give me a lawnmower and a spin trim, and I'll go door to door. And hey, you look like you need your yard mowed. And introduce myself, and $45, and that's done. I'd build a new business in a heartbeat, not by having the best website and a video intro on it. And I've got all that stuff now, but I paid for that by going to my client's house, having a truck, moving their stuff, making sure they were satisfied, and putting a check in my pocket. So don't confuse yourself with all the details that are out there, or get caught up in all the details. You'll get to those eventually. The most important thing: go get the client and put some money in the bank.
Absolutely.
And the second thing I see, and it happens in construction too a lot. I think it's kind of like military. I don't know if it's because it's a young, or male-oriented industry. I don't know what it is, but I see people and they get some marker of success, and then they'll go and they'll again go back to the loans and leverage, but they'll buy a new house, or they'll buy their brand new F-350 truck, and now they're $70,000 in debt on that, and then they'll well, I need to have this website for $5,000 instead of this little one I created for $1,000, and it is important to spend to grow your business and reinvest in it. However, if you put yourself out there where you are over leveraged and you're spending it all like it's always going to come in, at some point you're going to hit a pothole in the road. You're going to hit a speed bump, and you need to have cash reserves. So, give it 5 or give it 10 years, and then go and splurge on that vacation or on your dream home or whatever it is. But when you're first starting out, you should conserve every single dollar that you can. Spend it like it's never coming home. And so, make sure that you're prudent with your money. Don't think because you've got $40,000 in the bank, let's say, that's a lot of money. Because if you're having to meet a payroll, and that's actually not that much. So build up your cash reserves, and that'll also make you more mentally competent and ready to take advantage of other situations when they arise, because you've got a clear head and you've got the comfort of knowing your mortgage is paid, your rent's paid, or whatever it is. It gives you real power to have that backup in your savings account.
Yeah, that's such a powerful point. Talk a little bit about what's the effect on the entrepreneur's brain and their decision making when they're in a cash flow crunch. I mean, what does that? You were there. What did being in a cash flow crunch do to the way that you made decisions and operated?
Well, it really does. It spreads yourself too thin. When you've got $100,000 of liabilities and $20,000 in the bank account, that you've got to delay payments to someone, or you've got to work out a payment plan, and that's stressful. It doesn't allow you to see that when you're giving a quote for Mr. Smith's house and he needs a new roof, you don't even see the fact that Mr. Smith's neighbor next door, his roof is horrible. He needs a new roof done, but you're so caught up in your head on how do I pay this bill, or how do I handle this, either employee situation or a layoff, or whatever it is that's negative. You're not even open to the world of money that is out there for the taking. And so, making sure that you're mentally healthy first thing in the morning is how you start off. That's how you start off, so that you end up the same way that evening. Making sure that you're mentally prepared for battle that day, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Do you have a morning routine or some things that you do to get yourself ready for the day?
I'm working on that actually. I haven't had a lot of routine for the last several years, and I've kind of reached my limit on what I can do with intellect and just absolute tenacity. I mean, my business partner will tell you I never give up. And I'm smart enough to know how to do my advertising and marketing. I know how to get jobs, but I've kind of reached a plateau, and so I've been working on my morning habits. Stuff that you hear like exercising in the morning really does start your day off right. But I don't have anything concrete except one thing, because I'm still trying to get that morning routine down. But my one thing that I do every single morning, and I learned this from boot camp, is I make my bed every morning. And I'll tell you why for me that makes a difference, and probably for you, Todd, or anyone that's listening. If you start off and you make your bed in the morning, you've already accomplished your first task for the day. No matter how the rest of your day goes, you've already accomplished that first thing. You've set your to-do list off and checked it off within 2 minutes of you waking up. And then the second thing is, when you come home, whether you had a good day or bad day, if your bed's made, it gives you some tranquility and peace when you get home instead of stuff being in disarray. So that's what really sets my day off right. And I learned that from boot camp. Make your bed every morning.
Yeah, there's an old saying, and I think it was General Patton said it, that shined boots win battles.
Yeah.
And it's about discipline.
Yep.
And it's the little things that matter. It's the shine on the boots, the crease in the pants. There was an
Yep.
the old salesman saying from the 50s and 60s was shine on his shoes and a crease in his pants, and it's the little things do matter. And that's probably why the military focuses on that, because if you can't if you can't wear your uniform properly or shine your shoes or make your bed, then what are you going to do when things get tough?
Yeah, it's like a canary in the coal mine. It's very indicative of something much larger.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a big problem in and of itself, but it's a symptom of a deeper problem.
Yep, you got it.
Interesting. All right, you mentioned that you're a big reader, especially of business materials. What are some books that you would recommend for folks? Well, either what are some books that you would recommend for folks in construction leadership, or if nothing comes to mind, what are some books that you're reading right now that you're getting something out of?
What do I have? That one's on. I've got several that I'm reading right now, but none specifically pop right in my head. But I'll tell you, overall with reading books, I actually chose where I live now based on its proximity to a Barnes and Noble. And so literally there's a Barnes and Noble a block from me. I live in a mixed use area, and I can walk right next door to this Barnes and Noble, and it's amazing. And so I can go in there, and I just go in there sometimes for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and I buy a coffee there, so I don't feel guilty that I'm reading these books for free.
Right. Sure.
I want everybody to buy my book. Don't just read the coffee, or get the coffee. But yeah, I go in there and I'll just read, and I'll read about, and you said specifically with construction, nothing comes to mind on that, but it kind of doesn't matter. If it's about leadership or management or money management, you can take an idea you get from Fred Smith, who started FedEx, or from Jeff Bezos that started Amazon.com. And let's say you've got your own business and you're doing all right, let's say, 500,000 in revenue a year, but at that point you've just kind of bought yourself a job is all, and you want to take it to the next level. Guess what? It's been done before. You can learn from other people how to do that by paying $15 and sitting down and reading it for 3 hours. You can have all of their best knowledge and insights from business greats. You can stand on their shoulders, and you can, not have to reinvent the wheel. Just copy what they've done. And you could pull an idea from that $15 book that made you an additional $100,000 in revenue. Why would you not be in the bookstore all the time? Why would you not live next to a Barnes and Noble? Why would you not be downloading books on your Kindle from Amazon? All the knowledge is out there. It's all been done before. People have had businesses for thousands of years. And we live in a country where we've got more access to capital, and we've got a court system that works, that upholds property rights. We live in an extremely bountiful time, And it may not seem like it, but especially from the vantage point that I have now, there's people have more money than they even know what to do with. It's there for the taking. You just got to figure out how to do it, and you can learn from others by picking up a book or reading Inc. magazine, or just soaking up that knowledge that's out there and accessible more now than it ever has been in the history of mankind.
I think I need to go to a bookstore. Yeah, but you're right, though. It's, that for some reason, investing in ourselves is something that gets pushed off to the side, and we don't read as much as we should. We don't listen to, obviously, the people listening to this interview are tuned into one of the most amazing podcasts in the industry, obviously, at least in the opinion of the host. But I guess we get so busy with putting out fires and dealing with the stuff that's in our face that we're not taking that long-term view, and we're not investing in ourselves. But I agree. I mean, if you look at the successful people, they're investing in themselves. They're reading books. They're getting training. They're finding mentors. They're doing all these things that you're doing, and it's no coincidence. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
All right. If you could go back and give 20-year-old Nick some advice, what would you tell him?
Oh, wow. That's really tough, because I don't know that I'd change anything. That business bankruptcy was absolutely god-awful, but I wouldn't be where I am today without it.
Interesting.
It was a learning experience, and it's one that I did not understand why I had to go through it at the time. But I don't regret that at all. It was just a matter of, the perseverance and integrity will always carry you through. And I learned a lot of things not to do, and I also, it wasn't like it was a total failure. I also learned, things that I did correctly. I know the sales side, I know the marketing side, and I also, I saw from, I had customers that would spend with me, $10,000 to $200,000 on fixing their house, but there's money out there, and there's money out there for the I'd say taking, but for the earning. There's money out there for the earning. It really is, and I learned that, and I learned the things not to do, learned the things to do, packaged them together, started Two Marines Moving, and now I've literally got more business than I know what to do with.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I would say I came to the same conclusion. I wouldn't be the same guy that I am if I'd not gone through what I went through with my business. And I don't know that I call it a failure anymore, because what I've realized is that if it's not fatal, it's not failure.
Yeah.
Really, it was an experiment. It was an extremely expensive, extremely painful, extremely long experiment that I won't ever do again. But man, I'll tell you, when I see those red flags popping up now, I can see them from a mile away. I see the early indicators of the mistakes I made back then, and I see them, and it's like, and I know there's no way in hell I'm going through that again, and I go fix those things. So that is good advice, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's encouraging for people who've gone through some business reversal, let's call it, or an experiment that didn't go well. Mm-hmm. So it's not, just because your business didn't work, that's capitalism. It doesn't mean that you're a failure or you're not valuable. So that's good stuff. So, well, we are just about out of time. I really appreciate you being on the podcast and what you've shared, Nick. I know you've got a book out there and you've got a website. Tell us where if we want to find out more about you, follow you, read your book, where should we go?
Yeah, no problem at all. You can Google the name, find it on Amazon. My book's available there. It's called On the Move, A Marine's Guide to Entrepreneurial Success. Facebook is facebook.com/2marinesmoving. Twitter is twitter.com/2marinesmoving. And I'm available for public speaking. You can find my articles on Inc. magazine, and you catch me through any of those routes. I'll make myself available.
Sounds great, and I'll make sure and put some links in the notes from this call to your website, Facebook, Twitter, the book, and and some of the articles you wrote because they were extremely helpful. So, Nick, man, I really appreciate it. This was some great stuff. I learned a lot. I'm confident everybody else will as well. And best of luck with Two Marines Moving.
Awesome, Todd. Well, thank you and your audience for your time.
That wraps up another interview here on the Construction Leading Edge podcast. Don't forget to sign up for the free online training just for contractors, how to get out of cash crunch mode and upgrade your profit margins. You can go to constructionleadingedge.com/cashflow to get registered, or go to the homepage and click on the link there. My name is Todd Dawalt. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.